Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of the D3 Brothers podcast. This is the first spin-off pre-recorded podcast of Black Stitch Hockey's brand. Real excited to bring in our former primary contributor Damien up on the top in the Penguins hoodie above me. Good to have him back on a podcast as he was heavily involved in our MASCAC coverage during the inaugural MCLA season and was there with Liam and myself during the MASCAC playoffs and the games against Anna Maria and Fitchburg State. Potentially hopping on later in this episode to also talk some shop with us, and part of where the name from this podcast comes from is former MASCAC goaltender and Huntington star golfer Matthew Gover. Will be a regular installation of this podcast. Just really excited to join the D3 Hockey News guys and all of the podcasts that are out there covering D3 hockey, spending more time acknowledging the players, the coaches, and the staff that makes the conference and the league run nationwide. To start off, we're going to be really focused in, what we know best, MASCAC and LEC. Really try to focus down on maybe the newer and lesser covered conferences because it is our bread and butter. Over time, we definitely love to branch out and cover more, but we're going to see how that's going to go. In the long run. Apologies for that long-winded opening. As we wait on Gover potentially joining because he's a very knowledgeable former MASCAC player. Damien and I here are going to start this off talking about the LEC this week for a preseason outlook. As the season will be getting underway several hours after this podcast episode airs. So, really going to start off by just saying, real excited for Plymouth State to be moving into the LEC with just, really strong competition. One of the big headlines that I think everybody's excited for some really strong programs is, Plymouth State being out there with Norwich and Babson. Babson notoriously is the only team to beat three-time defending national champion Hobart in regulation in the last two seasons, which is fantastic on them, and it's good to see them potentially get themselves back into a national tournament. Um, and for Norwich, really strong blue blood program up in Vermont. They've been a great program for years. So seeing them also get away from Hobart is, really, really good for the game, I think, and for that program. And finally, Plymouth State upgrading the teams they play so they're not playing, three teams ranked between 80 and 86 in the nation, 2 to 3 times a year, I think is great for them as a program as well. And that's not to discredit, the other programs that have joined, which include but are not limited to UMass Dartmouth, Keene State, UMass Boston, Castleton, New England College, Southern Maine, and the first year program of Western Connecticut. Real exciting conference this year. And I'm going to immediately open the floor up to Damien, kind of get his opening thoughts on some of this.
Yeah, it's gonna be exciting. Obviously for a guy who, again, had to really kind of gather some of the stats stuff looking at. I mean, Plymouth State's been obviously the last few years watching MASCAC. Obviously, has been a team to watch. I mean, you think about the last few seasons. You look at like Will Reddick. Everybody knows Will Reddick in D3. I mean, he's two seasons ago. Obviously, he led. He had over 2 points per game. He had like what 54 points in 25 games. Obviously, again, last season his stats came down a little bit, which that's what happens. You expect it, but I'm really curious to see how Plymouth State's going to look in this conference because, again, obviously, with merging with teams from the NEHC, and obviously, again, we look at like Keene State, where it's their first year after being Indy. Um, how how they're going to play? Like, obviously, again, Plymouth State's been great. But I think again, seeing them play against Babs and seeing them play against, again, like Norwich, like you mentioned, and is going to lead to some really good matchups. And I think when you go down that roster, I mean, you see a lot of returning guys from like Will Prey, Ryder McCollum, who fucking nasty.
Great,
I
great
mean,
defenseman.
just use a lot of returning names. I think with goaltending though, I don't think their starting goalie from last year
Brand, yeah,
is here this year.
Brandon Shantz will be back for
Oh,
his
yep,
fourth year. Yep,
chances. Yep,
yep,
he is.
Shantz is
Yep.
back. Yep, which
So
is,
like they're gonna
it's
be,
great.
yeah, they're gonna be fun to watch. It's gonna be exciting. I mean, I'm looking at, I mean, one guy that sticks out to me. I just also want to make sure he's still on the roster. Um, Going off of kind of what we saw from last year, from again teams like Babson and Norwich, is goaltending. And Babson hockey, like Nate Mueller was phenomenal last season. When you look at his stats, I think he was top three easily with a 9.35 save and a 1.98 GAA. And that is crazy stats because when you play with in obviously that conference, you look at some of those teams where isn't Hobart. You're
Yep.
saying when they beat them, and I mean they just gravy boat you, and so he was phenomenal. And even looking at New England College, who again they finished sixth last season, was under 500 even in conference record. Anthony Bolio again 9.33 save, 2.29 GAA. So when you and I am not obviously in any means looking down at MASCAC or anything because MASCAC, I mean, there were some phenomenal games. And like we saw in tournament play last season, I mean, we saw probably some of the most miracle on ice kind of stuff where, obviously, again, the run that MCLA went on between Plymouth State, Anna Maria, and stuff. But, you look at some of the top goalies, and again, they were all, again, 9.2, 9.3 saves, so it sits right in there. But I'm just so excited to see, you know, what the goaltending is going to look like. Because, I mean, this conference is going to be unreal, I think, with a lot of that. Obviously, Norwich is another team that is going to be exciting because they're a favorite. They've been a great program for the last few seasons. Last year conference, I think they were like 15-10-3. No, sorry, overall they're 15-10-3. They looked really good. Obviously, again, they're going to have to get some scoring from other guys to replace Clark Kerner. But again, that's, I mean, top hockey programs, that's what they do. Um, I am also really excited to see what Keene State does because last year, again, first year independent, I believe they were like 13-10-1, I believe. And they goal diff was like a +4, which to have that because was that their first year last year with the program
Yeah, that was
back?
their first year as a D3. So that was their first year in NCAA. They'd had an ACA program for many years. And yeah, I think, to echo the sentiments of Scott Houston and Chris Sugar from D3 Hockey News, they're just as excited for Keene State as a dark horse in this conference, to really hit some stats to actually align my research to your research. Norwich also has a great goalie in Sammy Moliu. I might have butchered that, great goalie though. Sometimes I struggle with last names that only have four letters. As we know, we track the GSAA for Division Three goaltenders, and you look at Mueller with his plus 9.4 last year, which puts him in the 82nd percentile of all goalies in the country. We talk about Anthony Bolio, who I don't think is spoken about enough where he had a GSAA of plus 14, putting him in the 95th percentile as one of the top five goalies in the country as a freshman out of the EHL, which is phenomenal. Brandon Shantz gets his flowers for his 7.94 GSAA, again, an 80th percentile. Molu at a plus 7.38. Another good goalie there. And then, you look at Mueller for Babson, plus 9.4, 82nd. Where I'm getting that. And even Skelton, the goaltender for Keene State, a plus
Yep.
3.4 and 62nd percentiles, great goaltending for an independent first year program. We
Yeah.
talk about what happened to Plymouth State in the playoffs last year where they ran into Gover and, met their untimely end. Do I think that could have happened against anybody in MASCAC? I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself with this, but, Will Nepvo from Salem State, had a plus 16 GSAA last year and was in the 97th percentile, where Gover was in, the 85th percentile with his plus 10. So I think this is great for Plymouth State this season of they're going to play against, and I think they're the best team in this conference right now. They are returning 56% of their scoring from last season, which is equivocal to 62 goals. The only team that is returning more goals from their 2024-25 roster is Keene State, who's bringing back 94% and 77 of their goals, which is definitely worth a lot. Again, Keene State, I think, and Plymouth State are going to see a very similar roadblock here and learning curve of every night, with maybe one or two exceptions of some of the teams that are still trying to figure out what their program is going to be, of facing high-end goaltending every night. You're not gonna, and no disrespect to these MASCAC programs, but like, you're not gonna play against Riviere and Worcester State and Framingham State, who are going to struggle to score goals and struggle to stop goals. Like, Southern Maine might have been a bottom 10 school in the national rankings last year, but they've got some tier two junior guys in there. They've got experience. Castleton plays great defense. Like, you're not, even NEC, one of the best goalies in the country. Like, for a Plymouth State, they're not going to get any easy wins realistically. Like, they're going to have to go out there and really earn it every night, and that's, again, not to dismiss any of the accomplishments that they had in the MASCAC. It's a really good proving ground for a senior year for Will Reddick, to really be tested every night and see if, pressure creates diamonds, but it also bursts pipes, to quote, Madden 17, Phil Sims.
Yeah.
We're really gonna see what some of the guys like him and McCollum and Prey and Brea are gonna be able to do. And the same logic to a lesser extent, like Norwich and Babson just don't have to deal with Hobart this year. So like, all in all that's gonna be fun. And then like UMass Dartmouth and UMass Boston, I think, are both gonna have good years. UMass Dartmouth's got a great goaltending group. Burke, 68th percentile GSAA last year. A few more question marks in goal for UMass Boston, as they're not returning, a high level starter like a lot of these programs, but they're
Yeah.
returning 71% of their skater group. So like,
Yeah.
there's going to be
Well,
that linear connectivity where like every team has something going for them in the LEC, with, the exception of Western Connecticut, and that's just because they're a first year program. But we're going to get a lot of really good matchups throughout the season. I think it's going to be a great time to watch all of these teams. It's a bit of a premium quality and premium price product for streaming this year, but I think it's deserved. These are good programs. There are blue blood programs in here. It's really exciting to see, this conference really touch all of New England. And something that we didn't even really talk about with Plymouth that I also like is their non-conference schedule, where they're going to potentially play Plattsburgh, UNE. I think they're playing Hamilton. I think they're also playing Trinity this year. So, not only is Plymouth State elevating their program by just their intra-conference schedule being a little more challenging, but they're not ducking the competition, outside of the LEC. Like, this is a team that is actively making a statement that they should be able to chase, if not secure, but chase an at-large bid, which is something they were just never able to do with the quality of MASCAC opponents.
yeah. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I mean, they really hit on UMass Boston, just another quick point. But like Jude Curtis and Jack Mortson were discussing last season. They each had 22 points. And that's the thing too, like you're saying, the returning scores where UMass Boston, if they can just get a little bit more of that goaltending, a little bit more of that back end, I think that's really going to help them. And even the touchback on Keene State for just a little bit. But the thing that I like with them is they kind of got scoring throughout their roster. Like when you look at like their top four guys on points, I think like not like conference wise, like 27, 21, 20, and 15. And I think with Keene State, just like seeing some of the games, they're a fun team to watch. I remember just watching the exhibition last year with MCLA, and you're a big team, physical. They really try to push the pace on you, and that's what like I'm just really interested to see where that program takes the next step because last year again, I think almost the entire roster were freshmen. So I think and obviously a similar way that I look at MCLA. Obviously, MCLA last year their follow up year because obviously their first year they're like all freshmen besides I think one senior. So like and again, obviously MCLA didn't have the greatest. I think they were like 4-14-1 in the regular season, but obviously again they gelled, found they clicked at the right time, and that's why I think with Keene State like they're going to be such an interesting team to watch with that in the makeup of that team. But
Yeah, for
yeah, I mean,
sure.
Plymouth. Plymouth State. I mean, like it kind of makes me think of like other like we think of like college football, right? Where it's like it's all difficulty on schedule. You know, hey, is your conference legit? How competitive? And again, sometimes you see some really good programs and some good teams kind of get screwed over. So it's going to be nice to see Plymouth State really get to that next level and see if they can take advantage of it and really get into a higher rank going into the national tournament and seeing how far they can go, especially it being Will Reddick's senior year.
Yeah, I'd love to see that for them, and even if they can't do that, and they're the iron that sharpens the iron for a Norwich or a Babson, like I'm excited for it for hockey and in our state of New Hampshire. D1, UNH hasn't made a lot of splashes in the last few years, despite Alex Gagne being a fully New Hampshire born and depth product to get to the show with the Colorado Eagles in the A. But, really love to see for Vermont and New Hampshire, and Maine to an extent, especially in the southern part with Southern Maine. Really hoping with them and UNE, who's obviously not in this conference, to really elevate the flexibility of hockey in Maine, hockey in New Hampshire, etc. Just really something that I'm personally excited about potentially with the future of the LEC. And on that note, and with the joining of our other member, we're going to spin right over into the MASCAC as he has timed this pretty much perfectly to 15 minutes of LEC content.
Let's go. How's it
So,
going?
oh, it's good. It's good. So, MASCAC, I really like Salem State this season. I like Fitchburg State too. I think this is a two-team race. Anna Maria can come prove me wrong any day of the week. I invite them to do it. But I'm just gonna come down from the top. Salem State, they're returning 67% of their scoring from last year, and they're returning 66 goals from that group. We got Carson James, we got Carson Whitmore, and we got, Will Nepvo, who was, a 97th percentile goalie playing in a conference that just lost its most offensively proficient team besides the one he plays for. So, Salem State has a lot of pieces falling in the right direction to put them for a strong national title run. And,
They also have an All American too.
Exactly. And Fitchburg State returns a little bit less up front with 58% of their scoring coming back, but the senior season of Max Macchione, a 75th percentile goalie, gives us two just really good teams to watch and two really good programs to follow. And that's my cold open for the MASCAC, so I'm going to hand this over to Matt first, and then I think him and Damien can kind of ping pong here for a bit.
Personally, I see actually Fitchburg beating Salem, but that's only because playing against both those teams, it's a little bit different having that experience. I know Fitchburg, they're very heavy, like it's just a heavy team. It's kind of like Anna Maria. They're a great combo of Anna Maria and Salem in a way. Salem is more very, very offensive. Not a lot of defense going on. They're kind of like a run and gun team, which is kind of the way how they won a lot of games and how they kept in a lot of games in the league, especially. I mean, Will played really, really well towards the end of this, like the second half of the season, beating Endicott. Like he's played some big games towards the end. I know Mac was hurt for a lot of the year, so he never really got to prove what he could do. I'm actually curious to see with Mac if he can stay healthy throughout the year, if he can show what he did at the end, especially because he played really, really solid throughout the last few games and then playoffs. Because I know we played against each other. It was his first game back too, and he lit it up. Like I know we won in overtime, but it was a goalie battle till the end, and I know that championship game. Like he kept them in it. He was the reason why they won. It's not because of their offense or defense. It's literally because he played on his head. Um, but yeah, I don't see it really any other team besides Fitchburg, Salem State, or Anna Maria really making a wave. Maybe Westfield, if anything. If MCLA can figure out their back end and if they can figure out, I know that they're playing a more structured game now. but the preseason is kind of the preseason. Like it is what it is. Like they lost 6-1 to Westfield, and they beat actually Keene State 2-1 in overtime. But each game they're getting outshot 2-1. So we'll see what happens over there. I know Gloss is still getting his feet wet and still kind of figuring out the reins a little bit. So it'll probably take a semester or something. But he's definitely making a lot of improvements and adjustments as he goes, and he's a great coach. So hopefully they can figure it out as being my old school. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's makes sense. It's a good take. So one thing that I don't know if either one of you guys noticed, but both the Orme Lynch brothers who had played for Fitchburg State, who both had 23 points last season, went to Concordia this year. And I'm like, it's kind of interesting because, like, obviously Hunter Dunn had a great season last year with 28 points, but I was curious because I'm like, oh, I think they were both freshmen last year. So I'm like, dude, freshman, 23 points, good solid season. And yeah, they both transferred to Concordia. So that is going to be interesting.
But
Speaking of Fitchburg State, while we're talking about them and putting some air in their tires, and to just tie this all together on our transition from the LEC, love that they're doing, a charity-based game series to kick off the year with Babson. It's for a great cause, raising funds for a player who, is from Fitchburg, was a member of Babson, spinal injury. Really wanted to plug that in of we're actually going to get to see a nice little test of a top three LEC school in the top team, one of the top two teams in the MASCAC. And again, no disrespect towards Anna Maria. I just Derek Raposo was arguably the best defenseman in the MASCAC, and him moving on is just such a big hole for them to fill. I think Hennessy can bounce back this year. Didn't have a bad year last year. GSA of plus 1.59. He was in the 54th percentile, but he was a 9.34, I think, the year before in Independent. So, him having a bounce back year is going to be critical for Anna Maria to close the gap. They can do it. It's definitely not impossible, but like replacing your best defenseman is a very difficult thing to do.
100%. I don't know who they committed this offseason either. I know the style that they play is very very heavy. It's not a lot of not a style a lot of teams can play against per se. Um, so it'll be interesting to see how they develop throughout the year and kind of see how they go. But if Hennessy can figure out what he did and kind of play better, like he's known for, like guy was elite his first 2 years, so he's bound to bounce back and see what happens.
For sure. I mean, once we get past those top three, like, Westfield's a really interesting team. They didn't wow anybody with their offense last year, but, bringing back 83% of their scoring and, bringing back Aiden Winslow,
Yeah.
I don't necessarily like them to win the regular season just because the firepower gap, but like, everybody's talked about the MCLA Cinderella run last postseason where like out of all the remaining teams in the MASCAC, Westfield seems the most primed to kind of pull that off this year with they've got chemistry, they've got structure, and they've got a hell of a goalie. They've
Nah, I
also
agree.
they've also got the best road jerseys in the MASCAC and a top 10 uni in the country, and I think that has to count for something.
I'll give you best road jerseys now that Plymouth's gone, but
You're right on that. I don't really have much of a love for that color of green. Now, if somebody gives me, some free Plymouth swag down the road, be it from their men's or their women's team, I will wear it. But those Westfield road unis that resemble those late '60s Pens jerseys are just. I love to see them. I'd love to see them at nationals. Fingers crossed. Do I think Westfield should be at nationals playing Utica? I don't know. It could be a good time, but those jerseys against Utica potentially. Crazy for me to assume they'll be at Utica because Utica will be the two seed behind Hobart like they were last year. Actually, no, three
I'm
seed.
I'm gonna I'm gonna
Whatever.
make a I'm gonna make a hot take here, and say that UNE is gonna crack the top three.
I would not be shocked. I'm higher on UNE than most people. And UNE is probably going to play, the most consequent. They're going to play the most consequential game of New Hampshire college hockey this month, tomorrow night. Because if Plymouth State beats them in that game, that's going to crack open pretty much everything, since I do think that right now UNE is a top six program in the country, and they definitely do have the ability, I think, and you agree, you and I are in alignment that they could be a top three school by the end of the year.
100%, especially from a little bit of experience here. Like UNE is a program where they bring in guys that are more developed from what I've seen than Plymouth, and they're better at developing guys throughout. Just what the history shows, like no shot to Plymouth. Like they're a phenomenal program. They're gonna definitely probably crack the top 15 this year, no problem, no doubt. Especially if they can get Strobel back on his feet because he had that ankle injury earlier on. But UNE just brought in some heavyweights that I don't know if anybody actually ever realized or looked at. And that conference is going to be wide open now that Curry's goalie's gone. Like he was he was hands down the best goalie in the country, no doubt. He was
Yeah,
the reason why Curry went so far.
and I mean, I keep, the narrative now is that, Curry pulled a kid in from UConn, but again, Shane Soderwall has now defeated both Gavin McKenna and Keaton Verhoff in Division One this year behind the Clarkson team that is not better than North Dakota or Penn State. So like 100%, like I'm a little, again, Curry, incredible defensive program. No knocks against their coaching. But they didn't get a ton of goals last year. They didn't get a ton of scoring last year. So like whether or not that D1 transfer that they brought in can match, and I think Soderwall's goal saved above the average last year was like fucking plus 22 or some absurd
He
number.
was it was ridiculous.
Like he was in a universe all his own last year, and like it's not fair to expect anybody to come in and replicate what he did for that program last year. And yeah, that opens a big door for, maybe UNE to take that next step. And, again, Hobart, when, simply put, when it comes down to the national tournament with Hobart, you only need to beat them one night. It's really fucking hard to do, and nobody's been able to do it in 3 years. Like
Yeah,
in a win or die game, obviously Albertus and Babson have beaten them, but you only have to beat them once. It's much easier said than done.
they've lost what 2 games throughout the entire 3 year span that are going on. Like
Something
Beaver,
like
like
that.
it's crazy that they have a tandem too. Like Beaver, phenomenal, and you got Goyer, who is also phenomenal and arguably better than Beaver. If he ever gets a chance, it was just Beaver was there before.
Yeah, I mean, fucking Beaver's so good. He ran Graham Burke all the way to UMass Dartmouth, who's
Yeah,
pipelined our buddy Booze to a point where he is yet to see D3 ice.
I know. I know. Boozy's looking for his chance this year a little bit. He should.
Yeah,
He should get it. I know. Burke was really really good when we played him. You could tell there was a reason why he was at Hobart before.
yeah, he's so good. I mean, he's been very good. Dartmouth had that awful luck against I think it was Fitchburg in the playoffs in 23-24 with him. It was either him or McCallum who was on the bad end of that. But again, Dartmouth, great program. Good to see them in the LEC. Rounding up on the MASCAC, we have the bottom half of the league in MCLA, Framingham, Worcester, and Riv. Um, I hope, if nothing else, those four programs give us some really fun games.
Welcome to
Ri
your vacation. Came back from vacation.
I
Rivster,
mean, we'll see. We'll see. I know that Rib's going through some troubles right now.
yeah, they've
Are
turned
you
over. They're only bringing back 30% of their
out?
roster, three freshman goalies. Definitely a tough ride for Riv, but uh,
Rev needs to bring in a goalie, and they need to bring in probably a new coach at this point.
you know, I
Huh.
have a lot of, I have hope they'll turn it around. I hope they're better than last year. Same for Framingham.
Framingham, I feel like it's gonna be better than people think. Like they had a lot of good wins at the end.
I mean, the biggest thing that hurt Framingham last year on paper was just, their goalie tandem. Kilgallen and Swanborn just couldn't catch a break. They both finished in the bottom 20th percentile in goalkeeping last year. So high hopes that those two can just really put it together this year because they're not a bad duo. They just had a lot of bad stretches down the way last year. So real high hopes for Framingham to really Framingham Riv, and we've touched on MCLA. I hope the boys can put it together under Gloss. The D2
I know.
non-conference is tough.
I I don't get what coach was thinking with that one, but I mean, it's maybe not worried about rankings so much and just worried about like standing wise. That's the only reason I can think of maybe not playing some better top 30 teams and getting that experience. Like if you're wanting to go to in my personal opinion, if you're wanting to go to the national tournament, you're gonna want to play top 30 teams. You're gonna want to have that experience going into that game because it's a whole different ball game as we've seen. Like even last year, like you had three teams in the league in the top 30. You had Clem, Anna Maria, and Salem all at the end. Playing those teams compared to like playing like a program like UNE or Curry or Utica or Hobart is a whole different ballgame. Or St. Norbert, like if you go out west, like out west is arguably better than east. Like
Yeah.
it's like playing D2 is almost like not irrelevant, but you're not gonna get the same caliber that you are if you don't play a top 30.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think there's some good players out in the D2 sphere. Like, St. A's has some guys, Williams has some guys, but yeah, in the grand scheme of things for MCLA, it's definitely an interesting choice for a predominantly junior program. Guys who are in their second to last year of eligibility. Really trying to, I think, go all in. Again, MASCAC's going to be a one bid league too, so like, I think they're maybe banking that on some of those good D2 programs, it's going to sharpen them for the playoffs. Only time will really tell for them. I hope it works out because there's a lot of great guys in the room for that program.
Oh yeah, 100%. I know. I mean, it's tough not speaking from experience, but like they definitely developed a culture in the last 2 years that is one of the best cultures I've seen in hockey, and I'm curious to see how they carry it on the next month or two before the break and kind of see how the first semester goes. Like last year, we only got one win before the semester, and then we made the run at the end, and it's like just kind of goes to show again, like anything can happen in hockey. Like, but I'm curious to see if they can get off the good start and the right start. If now that they got a new coach, they kind of brought in a couple pieces, but they still have to gel and they still have to figure out the little things that every hockey team has to figure out a little bit.
For sure. And I'm going to round this into does anybody have any final thoughts before we wrap this first episode of this podcast?
I'm just excited to see. I mean, we're probably not going to get the absolute ludicrous upsets that we've gotten in D1, but it's definitely, I feel like it's definitely not off the table. So, I mean, that's the big one. I mean, as far as like just guys I'm curious to see of following, like, is Davis Kinya, freshman defender for Salem State last year, who had 32 points, led all freshmen. So I'm curious to see what he does this season, if he's going to, obviously, again, continue to produce more offensively. And yeah,
Hey, I'm more curious to see how the LEC is going to break out because they have some powerhouses in that league, and I know some of like the coaches and like some of the programs. It's going to be interesting to see with the different travel schedule how that affects also like their play because they're not traveling 8 hours to go play on a like Friday night at 7 o'clock in Elmira, or like they're traveling 3 hours to go play Plymouth or to go play Norwich or something. But like Norwich is also a fucking top 12 program too, and it's like you got so many powerhouses in one league. It's kind of like it's kind of like same thing with the C&E and the MIAC, like in the NCHA. Like, kind of curious to see how it all shapes out at the end of the day.
Well, luckily, our season starts with some interconference play this weekend, and hopefully we'll all connect at some point to talk some more about this next week as we really intend to cover really our little backyard here in New England over the next couple months. Really give the Black Stitch Hockey positive spin on the product and really just try to get some really fun headlines. So, really look forward to continuing this journey and sharing this product and hopefully giving some good insight to these two conferences as we move forward into the 2025-2026 season. Thanks to everybody who checked out this episode.